The Fed really just gave everybody a hall pass at this point in time, and you're seeing the growth stocks certainly responding at this point, and you're seeing stocks like Apple, you're seeing Netflix, you're seeing Google. They're all making some pretty interesting looking bases and setting themselves up to go back to the highs. So right now, even though the market is up 15% in 90 days, we're at a point in time where we're likely to go back and retest the old highs. I'm not sure you're going to break out, though.
Are you worried it's too narrow of a market run?
Absolutely, Brian. I think the market's too narrow. When I go through all of our work, what I'm seeing happening right now is I've got less than half of our groups, our proprietary groups, in any form of an uptrend right now. I've also got less than half of the groups right now that have gone back above a simple 40-week or 200-day moving average. So while this is interesting, it has some concerns to me that the breadth is narrow, feels not that dissimilar to what you've been seeing happening in January of 2018 and also what you saw in September of 2018. And we know what happened after that. So from my perspective, this market's probably going to struggle as you get back to those old highs, which is only 3% away.
Is it too much almost euphoria again for the FANG stocks?
I think it is probably euphoria, but I think it's also money just kind of saying, I got to come off the sidelines. I got to go somewhere. The pain trade is on. It's up right now. And a lot of managers did not get out of the way of Q4. And then they didn't get back in early enough to really participate for the 15% advance.
This is maybe out of your wheelhouse, but I was thinking about this. We were talking about it on the team the other day. Bonds are up, oil's up, stocks are up in China. They're up here. They're up in Europe. They're up. Everything's up. Where's the money coming from? Literally, who's the buyer out there?
I think with the Fed putting more liquidity in the system, I think you're seeing money coming off the sidelines. I think you're seeing that's what's pushing this tape up. But also, again, Brian, the breadth of this tape isn't as wide as what we have previously seen.
So need I remind you that your price target on the S&P 500 is 4% below where we are right now?
Correct. And you know what? I feel very comfortable with that, even though I get some grief from some of the sales folks for the fact that...
Yeah, be optimistic, Craig,
Be optimistic. You got to raise your price target. I heard that multiple times back in September.
And you're not doing it.
I'm not doing it because the seasonality is also something we got to consider, Brian, is that in the third year of a presidential term, you're strong from January through July, and then from July to December, it tends to be quite weak. So from my perspective, having had this large of an advance in Q1, Q2 typically will not follow through at quite as strong. April should not be as strong as what we've been seeing. So I think you're going to see this market come back in. And you know what? I'm going to be patient and wait for this market to come back in instead of trying to chase it up.
But as Jim Cramer says, there's the bull market somewhere. There's got to be something that you still like, that looks maybe undervalued, right? Something?
Absolutely. There's a lot of stocks. I can pick out some of these individual stocks, and we'll go through some of those. If you look at Apple, if you look at NVIDIA, if you look at stocks like Hormel, even Visa.
Going for the Minnesota homer there with Hormel.
A little bit of a Minnesota homer, but the chart does look great. I mean, it's a nice looking base. HRL. It's a nice looking base. You got a similar looking setup also in NVIDIA. It's well off its old highs. And clearly this is a stock that's well positioned for the future for automation, cars.
NVIDIA, not Hormel.
NVIDIA, correct.
I just want to make that
clear.
clear.
Doesn't work quite as well, right?
Not yet.
Not yet.
You never know with some of these
power
new
a car on it.
Not yet with some of these new engines. So are semiconductors still the leader they used to be?
I think they're still the leader, and I think what will ultimately potentially play out is some of these SaaS names have had very strong runs.
Software as a service?
Software as a service, and I would not be surprised to see some profit taking in those areas if a trade deal does get done, because a lot of people have been hiding in that area, and then the money comes back into the semiconductors, and you're making some pretty nice looking bases in those names. Bottoms.
Yesterday I tried to put my Craig Johnson hat on. That's a very big hat, by the way. And we showed a little technicals on the screen. We talked about the so-called golden cross, the 50-day moving average going above the 200-day moving average on the S&P 500. And history says when that happens, markets tend to go up a year out. Doesn't sound like you're that much of a believer in it.
I'm absolutely a believer in it, but it's happened 11 times. And I think what we can ultimately see is the market can work its way higher, but that might be more in next year as you press through some of these issues. Right now, again, seasonality is not going to be on our side. This is one of the strongest Q1s we've seen in a very long time. We are getting the golden cross, but I don't think that we're going to see new highs. We may have to consolidate here for a while first. Okay. And that's okay.
And energy stocks, they don't get a lot of attention because they're only 6% of the S&P 500, but that's been the hottest performing sector this year.
Correct.
Overdone?
I do think it's overdone. We actually just downgraded in the last month energy from overweight back to neutral. And I think there's been a lot of a lot of people just hiding in some of these energy names, things like Exxon, things like Chevron, some of those names. But I am starting to see things like COG. They're starting to make...
Cabot Oil and Gas.
Cabot Oil and Gas is starting to make a nice looking bottom here in the stock. You look at stocks like Valero. They look pretty interesting too. Very washed out, bottom in the making. And when you look at the fundamental side, which I'll leave to our analysts, but it looks starting to look a lot more constructive.